Hi everyone, it's Charles and today we're launching a Falcon 9 in KSP using KOS. For those who wonder, we'll go back to model rockets after this one. But I wanted to do this video for a little while to show you the script I wrote. In fact, this script, which is linked in the video description if you want to try it for yourself, is about a year old and was my first attempt at coding and scripting. This profile here is kind of similar to the NRL 108 launch, 28 degrees inclination with an RTLS for the first stage, but there the probe is a bit heavier and is roughly at the limit of the F9's payload capacity to LEO. We're just starting the pitch over a bit later than in real life, but apart from that it's pretty close. Now let me be clear, the way this script works is not anywhere close to what you would do in real life. First off, KSP uses sort of PIDs to control the rocket orientation, and all the script is doing is setting the PID set points. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, you should probably check my video on simulations, but anyway, the set point on the pitch axis is just a quadratic function, taking the altitude into account, and a couple of coefficients and offsets. And the yaw axis is just set to 90 degrees or east. The real F9, on the other hand, is probably using a full state feedback controller for its orientation, and the definition of the set points for the controlled states probably come from a polynomial approach. Again, this is all speculation, but the point is GNC on Ascent in real life is not that hard to understand, both for the state controller and the definition of a set point for the states. The main difference to the NRL 108 launch on the profile is that the stage 1 apogee will be a little bit lower in my case because, like I said, the probe is a bit heavier and I'm probably pitching downrange a little bit more. The throttle profile though is as close as I could get when looking at Declan Murphy's simulation on flightclub.io. I got to admit it was a bit of a nightmare to get it right, and now that I've learned more about it, I think there are way more efficient solutions. Anyway, we're coming up on MECO, and like you all know it, stage 1 will flip and start its Boostback burn. There is also a file transition there. We use 1 for the Ascent, and we're switching to 3 files for the RTLS part. I didn't find a good way to automatically switch to the other script while switching stages, but I do have that working for the RTLS on the first stage. So using 3 different files to get Boostback, coast, and re-enter. For the Boostback, all we're doing is setting the pitch set point to the horizon and finding the right heading to put our impact point on the latitude of the targeted landing site. This technique only works this way if we're launching with a 90 degrees azimuth. If it wasn't the case, we would have to rotate that error in a DCM matrix and offset it to find the correct heading. A nice little improvement that I could add in the future. We'll also monitor the longitude of our impact point and shut down the Merlins once it crosses our target. With the Boostback completed, we enter our coast phase. Now this is the worst part of the profile because I have very little control over KSP's PIDs, and that makes that part very oscillatory with the RCS. Now this is a good time to tell you about the mods that I'm using. You might have recognized it. We're using a realism overhaul, so that includes all the mods for fuel, proportions, solar system, and aerodynamic effects. For the Falcon 9 itself, I only use Tundra Exploration ports with the amazing realism overhaul files that they have provided. And I've got to say the plumes effect are stunning. I will also include the craft files in the description too. So we have still some time to spare. It takes quite some time for the booster to come back down, because altitude is the double integration of gravity. So it feels like we're hanging there at apogee, but our acceleration is still constant. So I wanted to thank you all who have subscribed to my channel since my last video. I actually got a lot of positive feedback and questions, and I so appreciate it. I also ended up in third place for the Simulink Student Challenge, so I'm still stoked about it. But something even cooler is that the guy who came in first place actually used Simulink for KSP, which is such a brilliant idea. I linked his video in the description below, and you got to see that. But as far as the channel is concerned, I'm probably going to do a video on fairing separation at the model scale, sort of comparing different approaches and talk about the pros and cons for each, and I will try to make it as nice as possible. Unfortunately, I have a very tight schedule between my classes and exams, so I may have to release it in 1 or 2 weeks. I don't have much more to say about the cost phase. There is not a ton of things happening at this point anyway. The real Falcon 9 does a bit of pulsing with its RCS, not only for attitude control, but with its ports directed toward the bottom of the vehicle, accelerating a tiny bit upward to keep the propellants at the bottom of the tanks. We don't have that model with Tundra Sport, and we also have a bit of atmosphere doing this job for us before the entry burn. Alright, we're coming up on the entry burn. It will start at 55 kilometers and 1,300 meters per second, and the yaw set points get our impact point right where we want it to be, and at shutdown we are still going to fall offshore if we do nothing, just like in real life. So that's where the grid fence and a bit of RCS kicks in, so that we pitch sideways and sort of glide toward the landing point. This maneuver is a bit more aggressive than in real life because my landing point is the marks on the KSC runway, which is more inland than the LZs are in real life. Now the computer is simply running a PD controller on the impact point for pitch, and the same thing with yaw, but with an I term. We have a couple of state changes during the descent to change gains and offsets too. And we finally start the landing burn at 4 kilometers. We activate throttle control, which is the only thing that I borrowed from someone else's script on GitHub. We're under aerodynamic control until 175 meters per second of vertical velocity, at which point we switch gains so that we're now using the thrust to divert back to the landing pad, since the drag is becoming less effective than the thrust to move our impact point. The profile is less smooth than in real life because I can't really make a very good controller and trajectory planner in KSP, and just as a reminder as we come in, we're looking for a landing on the aiming point markings on KSC's runway. And there you go, you can see we have a relative accuracy of around 6 meters, which is not completely true because this 6 meter deviation seems to be very consistent between landings, and we still end up on the marks consistently. So it might just be that the target in the script is a bit off and the gains of the controllers are quite low anyway. But the fact of the matter is, with this script, even if I change the Ascent profile a bit, I can still get a good result showing the robustness of this approach. Alright, now let's go back to stage 2. So I didn't have the time to write an algorithm for stage 2, so I just hand fly it. which is cool. I mean, you can't be consistent with hand-flying stage 1 landings, but it's much easier to put stage 2 in orbit. It also leaves me room for different scenarios and orbit parameters. And we're also coming up on fairing separation. There it goes. It takes a lot of time to accelerate and crawl to our target altitude, so I'm going to skip forward here. Now we're close to MECO, so we're going to throttle MVAC all the way down so that we don't damage the probe and also increase the accuracy of the orbit insertion. And even throttle all the way down and with a heavy probe on top, we are still pulling 2 Gs, which is quite a lot for a second stage. And coming up on orbit insertion, so I'm just looking at the map here because it's more obvious to see when I get a circular orbit. And you can see we only have 297 meters per second of delta V left, so that's about as much as the Falcon 9 can take to a 205 kilometers orbit. I always try to keep some fuel in the tanks to the orbit too. As you can see, I also gave a bit of angular momentum along the long axis to spin stabilize the probe. There is no real reason for that, apart from fun though. And here is the payload separation. Now I will let the stage and the probe gently drift apart, and then I will put the second stage in retrograde and deorbit it. You can see how the stage is light too. We had 297 meters per second of delta V left with the probe still attached, but now we have 977. I will also make sure to leave some fuel in there and not completely go to depletion in order to avoid a hard shutdown. Even if it doesn't really matter in this case because it's the final burn for this stage anyway, and it will re-enter and burn up in just a few minutes. Alright, and with the deorbit burn completed, I will end the video there. I hope that you like it. I hope that you can enjoy trying those KOS files if you have KSP and KOS. And I hope to see you next time. Don't hesitate to leave your questions in the comment section. I will try to answer those and any feedback that you have. Alright, see you next time.